So welcome to the slidecast of the Algerian War of Independence from 1954 to 1962. The purpose of this is to look at the causes of the war, not the actual course of the war. So we're going to be going up to 1954. We were looking at just some geography to get some placement. Algiers, which is the capital city of Algeria, is based in the top center of the country, and Algeria itself it's vast, but a lot of it is desert. So the main cities are on the kind of northern coast, nestled between Morocco and Tunisia, opposite France and Spain. It makes it a natural place, as you can see in the bottom right there, to be a French colony, close to France, northern Africa. Gives them a gateway into the rest of Africa. So why Algeria was a French colony. Learning objectives, as you can see here, looking at the causes of the Algerian War, the impacts of short and long-term causes, and most importantly really is trying to ascertain a judgment as to the most important cause of. The table in front of you just shows you all the different types of guerrilla wars, the main ones, and you can see in the far right there that the fact is that guerrilla tactics are wholly successful, really. There's been a couple of instances when they haven't, but on the most part, a guerrilla war takes a long time. It relies on just one person fighting that fight, and it's very hard to determine who the fighters are. So a guerrilla war, as you can see here, and Algeria is no different, is a successful method of combat, particularly for a country that has natural environments that are useful. It could be mountainous regions, it could be cities. Just looking now about where Europe came from in terms of being in Algeria. The European settlers came, it was obviously a French colonial country. They came, and it isn't just French, I want to point that out, but it came for cheap land and job opportunities. And an attempt to make Algeria integral to France, the French tried to assimilate Algeria. And by that I mean the culture would copy that of the French. It became a French colony around in the 1830s and 40s after a series of military campaigns in the area. But they tried to assimilate Algeria both culturally and administratively. So that's going to upset when we look at that, we're talking about indigenous native Muslims, and they remained a majority of the territory's population throughout its history. And if you think about the French, a good question to be looked at, the Roman Catholic faith is strong in France, and the Muslim-dominated Algerian faith. You have to look at the conflict that would arise from that. Very different in their approach, and obviously if one is trying to dominate over the other, there's going to cause conflict, particularly one that was so ingrained in Algeria being the Muslim faith. Late 19th century, the assimilation of Algeria grew more and more successful from the European point of view, and more settlers came with their technology, investment, and illness. It's a sad state of affairs, but often when Europeans colonize places, they bring with them illnesses that wipe out populations. Some of the natives resisted through guerrilla-style attacks, but at this point it wasn't coordinated enough to have a significant impact. So through military campaigns, European settlement, and illness, by the 1870s, the native population of Algeria was declining, and the Muslim discontent really was a major cause of the war. It stemmed from economic inequality, and this obviously aggravated them and aggravated their view of the colonial regime. And just some statistics here that support that. 75% of the Muslim population was illiterate in Arabic. That speaks to the assimilation of the French culture. So French was becoming more dominant over the Arabic language. Unemployment amongst Algerian Muslims was over 1 million, and twice this number were underemployed, which means that they were doing jobs which was below their skill level. This is clearly a long-term cause of the war, and was definitely a motivation. French being so strong. Let's look at France quickly and just see where they were as a nation. At this point, in 1954, they'd been through 2 world wars. Both wars they'd been occupied, and both wars land of theirs had been destroyed, and their society had been impacted. Both wars they were victorious, but they had relied heavily on other countries. And the Second World War really reinforced that France was a declining power. This was confusing for the French. Did they move forward into this new world without being a superpower in terms of an empire? Or do they try and linger on? And 2 things really exemplify this. One was giving Morocco and Tunisia independence in the mid-1950s. Odd for Algeria, who is nestled in between those 2 countries who didn't get it. And this longing for the past, the Indo-Chinese wars and the holdings there, trying to hold on to colonies there, and of course Algeria, meant the French weren't quite sure about where they were going in terms. Causes a lot of discontent. Now let's look at another cause, and the end of the Second World War shouldn't be looked at as a cause of another war, but it is in this in this factor. And before I start, like the Pied Noir as a term that we need to be aware of. They're the Blackfeet, and they are French settlers and descendants of French settlers. So these are Europeans who have settled in Algeria. Just hold that thought. Now, the end of the Second World War is a cause. I mean, there's 9 years between the start of the Algerian War and the end of the Second World War, but really, after the defeat of the Nazis, I think the world probably felt that independence would come to various different countries because they're fighting for freedom. The same for Algerian nationalists, felt that the French would give them their independence. They didn't, and a direct result of that was massive violence. 6,000 people were killed, Muslims, Pied Noirs, and French soldiers, in this uprising against the French, and it just speaks that the Algerians are willing to inflict. So this conflict in 1945 with the 6,000 dead established three main groups, sometimes four, which were involved in the Algerian War in 1954. The first being the French government, who were occupying Algeria. The second were the Pied Noirs, the European settlers, the French settlers, sorry. And the third is the Algerian nationalists, and we'll come on to the nationalists. At times during the conflict, the army would act as a fourth group, splitting away from the government because they were unhappy with the government's decision, particularly some of the things that Charles de Gaulle did. But on the whole, there are three main groups, and as I said previously, that the brutality of the 6,000, there was another war, and the Algerian War did prove that. So, looking at the main group who fought against the French, the Algerian nationalist movement, or the FLN, the Front de la Libération Nationale, they were the main nationalist movement, but they emerged from a group, a group of other nationalist movements. There wasn't just one, the FLN just happened to be the dominant one. And this table really shows those groups. So you can take some time and you can see the FLN combined all of these groups and came up with one that appealed to them. The two main leaders, Ahmed Ben Bella and Khalid Boumediene. Ben Bella was one of the founders of the FLN, and he's captured early in the war, actually in 1956, traveling to Tunis, and he spent most of the war in prison. He later actually became Algeria's first president, and he was deposed in a coup by our second person, Boumediene. He was a commander of the military wing of is the ALN of the FLN, and is stationed in Tunisia. He later took control of the independent Algeria in a coup, and he actually ruled as president from 65 to 78. So there's two leadership figures here. So the main aspirations of the FLN, which led to this war, was the fact that they were experiencing poor economic conditions for Algerian Arabs. There was massive income differentials, and there was inaccessibility of land ownership for people who actually, this is their land. Another cause is external influences, and kind of the examples that showed Algeria. So the first one is Mao, who had taken control of China, of course, in 1949, and in 1952 had fought the USA to a standstill, and this gave a real example of you can fight a major power and, if not win, you can at least cause problems. And then what happened at Dien Bien Phu was really interesting, is that the French were defeated, and their withdrawal from Indochina really does solidify the fact that they're a declining power, but it also presents an opportunity for Algerian nationalists who are looking at that as an example of the French being defeated. Although there had been guerrilla violence by the FLN in Algeria, this increased dramatically after the defeat at Dien Bien Phu, so it can be looked at inspired them. There are real differences though, so we have to be careful as historians looking at this. Whilst the Viet Minh in Dien Bien Phu, they were ideologically motivated by communism. The FLN had none of that ideological motivation. The Viet Minh also enjoyed the support from China, Big Brother, a very powerful Big Brother as well. The FLN didn't have that kind of support. Indochina is, of course, remote geographically from France, a long way away, and Algeria is very close, much easier to send troops there than it is Indochina. And French law prohibited the use of conscripts in Indochina, and there was none of those restrictions in Algeria. All that to say that France had a much stronger base to work with in Algeria than they did have in Indochina. And on the 1st of November 1954, the FLN conducted a number of coordinated bomb attacks across Algeria. It'd be useful at this point to obviously get yourself more information, more notes, and you can do that in a summarized form. 15 minutes is a good time, and really look at long-term versus short-term causes. Long-term cause, a good example, is the end of the Second World War, because it inspired that nationalist rebellion killing 6,000. But just summarizing this, would be very, very useful. All of this material is available on Teachers Pay Teachers. My username is resources for learning, 4 with a number, and you can download all these keynotes for free there. Thank you.